Lisa Bluter reveals the two biggest challenges of coaching Caitlin Clark. Former Iowa Hawkeyes head coach Lisa Bluter got real about the reality of coaching Caitlin Clark.
The WNBA is going crazy after Caitlin Clark's former college coach finally spoke up. During an interview, Lisa Bluter provided details about her experience coaching the biggest star in women's basketball. She discussed difficulties that no one was aware of. There were times when Clark's career would have been ruined, but she managed to prevent the most well-known athlete from going insane. Everything we believe to be true is altered by this. Did Lisa Bluter's revelations about Caitlin Clark surprise you in any way, or did they support your preconceived notions? Tell us in the comments.
Says it's wild to remember that less than 2 years ago, Caitlin Clark was still playing college basketball at the University of Iowa. Given all that Clark has already experienced, hold on, let me make sure my mic is right. Okay, we good. Has already experienced and accomplished in the WNBA since that time. Her iconic college career feels like ages ago, although it's impossible not to think back upon these days fondly when number 22 was setting NCAA records and leading the Hawkeyes to 2 consecutive national championship games.
Since retiring from coaching during Caitlin Clark's senior year at Iowa in 2024, Lisa Bluter has not received much media attention. After giving the program to her longtime helper Jan Jensen, she sort of vanished from view. She occasionally attends games and provides commentary on the Big Ten Network, but nothing compares to the attention she received during the Clark era. It was a different era. Every game felt like a national event back then, and Iowa women's basketball was the hottest thing in sports.
Great. And then there's the question is, what was the biggest challenge in coaching Caitlin Clark? And the answer, 2 aspects, really. First, during COVID, there was nobody in the stands. It was hard to build relationships because of the isolation. To get her to become a good leader, it took time because she was so used to doing everything on her own, but she learned it really well. You know, that's something that has been emphasized quite a bit by her and both Jan Jensen. And then the second point says, second, at the end of her career, there was so much noise. All the people that wanted a piece of her, I'm amazed how she handled it. She didn't get a big head. She was still a goofy kid instead of becoming.
Bluter is back in the spotlight again, and this time she's speaking openly. In a recent interview with the Gazette, she shared some very honest thoughts about what it was truly like to coach Caitlin Clark. Some of her comments are quite surprising because they challenge many of the common narratives people have about Clark. According to Bluter, coaching the most prominent star in the history of college basketball came with unique difficulties that very few people outside the program ever realized. She explained 2 major challenges she faced while working with Clark, and each of them is interesting for very different reasons. The first challenge took place early in Clark's career at Iowa during the COVID period. Remember how chaotic that time was? Empty arenas, strict isolation, and everything essentially shut down. Bluter said it was extremely difficult to form strong relationships with players during that period because everyone was so isolated. One of the biggest challenges, she noted, was helping Clark grow into a strong leader.
Back natties is insane. Like, come on now, let's be serious. The person who got the best access to Clark during these developmental college years was Lisa Bluter, her Iowa head coach. Bluter retired from coaching after Clark's senior year in 2024, and her longtime assistant Jan Jensen took over the program, and Jan Jensen's doing a hell of a job as well. While Bluter has been seen at Iowa games and is still a part of the Midwest women's basketball scene, she occasionally does color commentary on the Big Ten Network. She has certainly been out of the spotlight more than she was as a head coach, especially during Clark's 4-year tenure in Iowa City.
Wait, what? Caitlin Clark struggled with leadership? The same Caitlin Clark we've seen take over games and carry entire teams to victory through sheer determination? Yes, that very same player. According to Bluter, Clark was so accustomed to handling everything herself that it took time for her to grow into a true leader who could trust her teammates and help bring out their best. It was something she had to develop over time. Bluter made it clear that Clark eventually mastered that skill and became very effective at it, but it didn't happen instantly. It was a gradual learning process. This is a pretty significant revelation because the common narrative around Clark has always suggested that leadership came naturally to her, as if she was simply born with it. But that wasn't entirely the case. She started out as an exceptionally gifted individual player who needed to intentionally work on becoming a strong leader within a team. In some ways, that actually makes her story even more impressive, because it shows that she recognized an area where she needed to improve and dedicated herself to turning that weakness into a strength.
Clark. At one point in their discussion, Bluter was asked what was the hardest part about coaching Clark, and she said two aspects, really. First, during the panoramic, I ain't trying to say certain words, YouTube be tripping. There was nobody in the stands. It was hard to build relationships because of the isolation. To get her to become a good leader, it took time because she was so used to doing everything on her own, but she learned it, and she learned it really well. Second, at the end of her career, there was so much noise and all the people that wanted a piece of her. I'm amazed at how she handled it. She didn't get a big head. She was still a goofy kid instead of becoming a prima donna. And here she said, Bluter has expressed in the past that it took Clark some time to warm up to her Hawkeye teammates as a freshman before blossoming into a great leader. And her stance on Clark being able to block out all the noise that came during her upperclassmen years also makes sense. Several of Clark's teammates with the Indiana Fever have spoken about her goofy side, which Bluter also alluded to. It's awesome to hear that Clark has managed to keep.
Think about what Bluter is explaining here. You have a player so gifted that she can completely take over games on her own. At earlier levels of competition, she didn't need much assistance from teammates to secure wins. But once she stepped into the college game, the talent gap became much smaller, and relying purely on individual dominance was no longer enough. Suddenly, success required something different. She had to help her teammates improve, place trust in them, and raise their level of play. For someone who had been the best player on every team since childhood, making that mental shift was a significant challenge. The COVID isolation only made that adjustment even more difficult. When players couldn't interact normally with teammates because everyone was socially distanced and living under strict restrictions, building strong relationships became extremely tough. Without those everyday interactions, developing the trust and chemistry needed for genuine leadership was far more complicated. Clark had to navigate and learn all of this during one of the most difficult circumstances imaginable. According to Bluter, Clark eventually figured it out, but it required time and deliberate effort. The second major challenge Bluter discussed came at the exact opposite stage of Clark's college career. By the time she reached her senior year, the level of attention surrounding her had become almost overwhelming. Everyone seemed to want access to Caitlin Clark. There were constant media requests, endorsement opportunities, interviews, public appearances, fans, and critics all demanding her attention. The spotlight on her was nonstop and incredibly intense. Bluter admitted she was impressed by the way Clark managed all of that attention without letting it inflate her ego. Instead of turning into a diva, she remained the same playful and down-to-earth person she had always been. That's notable because history shows what fame can do to young athletes. Many highly talented players receive so much praise and attention that they begin to believe the hype surrounding them. They can become difficult for coaches to manage, develop oversized egos, and sometimes start acting as if they are bigger than the team or even the sport itself. Clark, however, apparently never followed that path. According to Bluter, considering the immense spotlight and pressure she was under, the fact that Clark stayed grounded and unchanged was genuinely remarkable. Consider the level of fame Clark reached during her senior season. She appeared on magazine covers, starred in national commercials, and every arena she played in was packed. Television viewership records kept falling whenever she was on the court. She essentially became the face of women's college basketball and, in many ways, a symbol for women's sports overall. That kind of spotlight is an enormous amount of pressure for a 22-year-old to deal with. Many people would either crumble under it or let it inflate their ego, but Clark managed to avoid both. Bluter also spoke with USA Today and expanded on these ideas, revealing even more interesting details. She mentioned that she and Clark would sometimes text during games to talk about how things were unfolding for Iowa. That detail is fascinating because it shows their relationship didn't end once Clark turned professional. Bluter isn't just a former coach to her. She's clearly still a mentor whom Clark trusts and stays in contact with. When asked how Clark managed the attention and criticism that came with her fame, Bluter explained that at Iowa, they worked very intentionally on blocking out the noise and keeping a narrow, focused mindset. That mental approach is clearly benefiting Clark now in the WNBA. Because if we're being honest, the criticism and negativity she experienced in college is nothing compared to what she has faced as a professional. The physical style of play, the questionable hits, remarks from other players, and even their families, along with constant media scrutiny, it has all been nonstop. Despite that, Clark has responded with impressive composure. Blutter also made a comment that really stands out. She said that when Caitlin's light shines, it shines on everyone around her. What she meant was that Clark's success lifted the entire Iowa program and helped bring greater attention to women's basketball overall. Blutter also pushed back against those who try to downplay Clark's achievements instead of acknowledging and celebrating what she has accomplished. This was clearly a reference to people like Sheila Johnson, who publicly criticized Caitlin Clark after she was named Time Athlete of the Year. Blutter dismissed that criticism as unnecessary and said that instead of trying to diminish Clark's achievements, people should be supporting her because her success is helping elevate all of women's sports. Blutter even compared Clark's influence to that of Billie Jean King, which is extremely high praise. King famously reshaped the future of women's sports through her activism and her historic match in the Battle of the Sexes. For Blutter to place Clark in the same conversation highlights just how significant she believes Clark's impact has been. The coaching philosophy Blutter went on to describe also offers an interesting look into how she approached developing players like Clark. She explained that Caitlin Clark is incredibly driven by goals, and whenever she believes something will contribute to the team's success, she fully commits to it. That directly challenges another common narrative about Clark, that she is selfish or only focused on boosting her personal statistics. According to someone who coached her for 4 years, that perception simply isn't accurate. Clark, she said, always prioritized the success of the team above anything else. Blutter also gave credit to Clark's parents for helping keep her grounded. That point matters because the influence of family in keeping young athletes humble and focused often doesn't receive enough attention. Clark's parents apparently played a major role in making sure the growing fame didn't change who she was. Even as her life transformed dramatically around her, she remained the same person. One of the most fascinating parts of Blutter's comments came when she discussed the importance of eliminating outside distractions, which was clearly a key element of her coaching philosophy while working with Clark. There were countless distractions vying for Caitlin Clark's attention: media obligations, sponsors, fans, critics, and Blutter's role was to help her cut through all that noise and stay focused on basketball. The fact that Clark maintained such a high level of performance despite these pressures speaks volumes about both her mental resilience and Blutter's coaching. Blutter also noted that keeping Clark locked in on the team's objectives wasn't particularly difficult because Clark was inherently so driven. Their shared goal was to return to the Final Four and capture a national championship. While they ultimately fell just short of that pinnacle, Clark still led Iowa to back-to-back national championship games, an extraordinary achievement that often gets overshadowed because they didn't win the title. Equally notable is what Blutter didn't mention. She made no reference to any significant behavioral issues or attitude problems with Clark. She didn't describe her as difficult, demanding, or problematic in any way.